we are back with A.R. Sales, aka the A.R.T podcast. I am A.R.T. Nevada, and today I am joined by Kassidy VanGundy, author of Cursed Fate, released June 16th. So we are debut month, family, siblings, whatever you want to call it. It is out now on Kindle Unlimited and paperback. Get it. It's worth it. Kassidy, how you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
I am outstanding and improving. So diving right into it, where did you get your start in writing? Was it a thing that came at a young age? Did it develop later in life?
Yeah, so I was the stereotypical shy kid that didn't have a lot of friends. And so what do you do when you're by yourself? You make up stories and you make up friends. But for real, I mean, I've been writing as recreationally, like a hobby for the majority of my life. But of course, when you're young, you want to make a career out of it. And then life gets in the way and you try to do a more practical job. And so I've been in school for the last 6 years, but then when the pandemic hit and everything turned upside down, I turned back to like my passion projects, and I'm happy to say that this is turning into like an actual career. So yeah, really, really exciting. And that's kind of what led me up to this point.
So where did you think that your inspiration come from as far as genres go? Like, what was the reading that kind of hooked you into what reading was for the first time? Like when you read a passage that was like, oh, okay. I want to do this.
Right. For this particular project, it was actually at the request of my then boyfriend, now husband. He makes video games and he wanted to do like a multimedia project and like hired me on, I guess, as someone who could flesh out a whole background story for this book. Of course, I didn't listen to any of his feedback and I did my own thing. Because that's just how that is. And I just totally appropriated his story and I just went and completely changed it. But it was always meant to be a very adventurous type of book. That's what I'm attracted to as a reader. I like fantasy stories. I like adventure stories. I like things that are going to make me think and take me along for the ride. So that was always the forefront. But I remember the moment I wrote down like the first introductory paragraph, and it was just a blend, because I did poetry beforehand, right? So a lot of it, I like descriptive language. And when I use that to convey emotion and set the scene for like a story about a young man who's on this new journey of his life, he just graduated and like, what's next? And when I started writing this, I was a 19-year-old too. So it felt very close to home. And I was like, you know what? Yeah, this is it. This is me. And this is what I'm going to put out there. And I'm going to try to tackle this with the same like young adventurous spirit that I had at that time, if that makes sense.
No, it makes complete sense.
Yeah.
Are there any works in particular that grabbed your attention at a young age and kind of like, twisted the tree branch, so to speak?
Oh, of course. Yeah. So again, I was a Harry Potter kid. I feel like every millennial is a Harry Potter kid.
I actually am not.
Are you not? Oh my gosh.
I'm a Percy Jackson kid. That's right.
Oh, okay. My best friend was a Percy Jackson. Like, yeah, totally get it. I feel like there's a very defining moment in young adult fiction for us growing up. I just felt like that was so much of a trademark where I don't know if certain things are as like, I mean, there's still really good books out there, but I just remember it being so iconic, right? Like it was the young adult genre that was really pushing media back then. And so I was a Harry Potter kid naturally, but I also read other books. Like I was, again, even younger, like Goosebumps. And I started reading horror at a very young age. And then reading things that were political works that weren't necessarily age appropriate at the time, I think. But yeah, because parents push that onto you. So I try to incorporate a lot of political elements that I learned from, the books my parents recommended. And just kind of digesting my world in my own way. As a teenager, I really gravitated to Toni Morrison a lot. And like, I just fell in love with more poetic works, and it's really hard to incorporate that into adventure. Like it's different. But I feel like with me, it's more about conveying that emotion along with the adventure, as opposed to just like world building and storyline. I mean, that's fun too, but yeah, I think those are my major things that really stick with me as a person and as a writer.
Now, you went everywhere as far as genre goes, which I love.
Yeah.
I love that a lot. How do you think that defines the genre that you write in? And for the people that are unaware, what genre would you say that you would classify yourself in? Not saying that you can't write other things, but what would you say is your home?
Oh no, my home's definitely like action and adventure with hints of fantasy. I'm working on a different sci-fi piece too. That piece is more about like a post-apocalyptic society, which is around a boy band. Um, yeah. So
Well, you got to
that's
get into that. You got to get into that.
oh yeah. It's work in progress. There's no title. But I feel like my personality is uh, it's the feminine energy meeting the classic adventure novel, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So when I talk about those poetic elements, and those are traditionally feminine stories, you don't actually associate them with action and adventure. And I think that's kind of my wheelhouse, because even though my main character is a boy, every other character around him is all women, and women are kind of the ones that are pushing him throughout the story.
I
And
love that.
yeah, and I don't know if that was just a subconscious thing or what, or just me inserting more of like my perspective into it.
A
But
lot
yeah,
of people can relate to that. I mean, I
I
can relate
think
to
so.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, it's fine. It's just again, it's hard to pin down. I want to make adventure stories that I'll obviously cater to as many people as possible, but I don't want them to lose this kind of punky feminine edge, because I think if you see me, like I have pink hair and pink lipstick on, this is very much a very feminine edge. And I think even with young adult that's like centers around female characters, they're always done to be limiting in terms of, oh, they're just kind of like this plain person really fighting really garish. And I don't know. I think if you read the book, it will make a little bit more sense. I'm sorry I'm not very articulate at this, but yeah, I'm trying to mix playful, feminine fun within the traditional adventure setting. And there's little bit elements of like scary horror in there as well that you might not expect, I guess. Yeah.
No, I mean, like, you might sound like you're just kind of like going all over the place, but I 100% understand what you're talking about. You know
Okay.
what it made me think of? Have you seen Avatar Korra? Like that?
Yes. Oh my God. Yes.
That's what immediately when you started talking about that, that's what it made me think of. It's like I 100% agree with you. A lot of the adventure stories, I mean, Harry Potter, Percy Jackson, we just talked about them. Who are the main protagonists? Males.
Right.
And the women are very strong women. I'm not going to say that they're not like fleshed out characters, but they're not where the spotlight is on. Right. Avatar Korra has the spotlight right on her, and it's like that adventurous spirit, but like you never forget she's a woman. That's what I liked about the show. They made her tough, but to me, she wasn't a tomboy. Like she made her about it. And same thing with Asumi. I think Asumi is one of like the best written characters too.
Right.
So immediately that's what your book made me think of that.
Okay.
Do you think that specifically talking about Avatar Korra, I think that was like a cool little segue. How do you incorporate sci-fi? Because that's one thing that I think Avatar Korra like really mixed in well, like the whole feminine energy, adventurous spirit, but then the sci-fi. So how do you kind of attribute that to your book about the boy bands? I mean, I'm foaming at the mouth to hear about that.
Oh, okay. Again, that is a very early work in progress. Like I literally I dedicated the last couple of years to this, and I just started writing it. It's almost like cyberpunky type of sci-fi, like in the future. And
what year? Do you have a year, or are you ambiguous?
No, still ambiguous. But it's this idea that like they're the last real boy band on Earth. With people, and that most of the entertainment industry, because they keep pushing for perfection, just like physically or even in terms of talent, have like progressed into like AI or like hologram, like Hatsune Miku type things. So that's kind of like this world they're in, where they have to constantly compete with this beauty standard and talent standard, and they have to really prim to that. And then the minute, again, not giving away too much of plot, but the minute one of them doesn't conform, he's like taken out. And so the other band member is trying to figure out what happened to his friend, and they have to get into the underbelly of this sort of society.
Now that is some cool shit right there.
Oh, thanks.
What? What genre? Like, I know it's a weird tangent to take it, but like, what genre are they? K-pop? Are they like Five Direction? No, it's not Five Direction. What are they? Right. One Direction, right?
Yeah. So again, a lot of my inspiration, again, like BTS is huge right now, right? So like
which
it's
almost
BTS is like a Korean. It's Bulletproof Boy Scouts, is I think how they translate it in English. But
BPS. Oh, okay.
Yeah. So
not beats per second for all the
no
engineers out there.
Yeah, but I mean, obviously, I want this to transcend what they're doing now. And so it's kind of like the same idea of like what K-pop's doing right now, but pushing it even a little bit further. So again, like the characters I have right now are all like from different backgrounds. And there's one character I have that his name's Lo-Fi, and it's purposely to make fun of like lo-fi now as
Yeah,
a
yeah.
genre. And he's treating it almost like, oh, this is, you know how people are like purists with music and they're like, oh, this is back when music was like the
Yeah,
best.
100%.
That's his character, and that's how he approaches lo-fi music, what we have now. So again,
How
it's
does he
just
look aesthetically? Does he have like headphones on? Is always doing homework by like a backdrop of like
yes,
the city?
yeah, very nerdy dude. Like again, like classical music nerd, right? And trying to incorporate the band to get serious because this is art, whereas like another character is just going off and being like a rock star, superstar, slutty kind of person. So yeah, it's fun.
Now, again, a weird tangent to take it, but like,
Yeah.
would you say that you're like a music person? What you call your autophile or whatever they're called?
Me personally, no, but literally everybody in my family is. Like, my sister has taught herself like 3 different instruments. My brother, yeah, I know. My brother was a musical theater nerd. My husband was a singer and plays guitar. My dad plays guitar.
What?
Yeah, I don't have that talent. So I'm literally just kind of like taking inspiration from them a little bit. And like, I appreciate it. Don't get me wrong. Like, but I can't sing. I can't produce, right? I'm just a fan. So yeah.
Well, the reason I asked is because, especially when it comes to music, like purists, right? Like,
Yeah.
I think anytime, like I remember when EDM got like popular, like back in like what 2008 or some shit like that.
Yeah.
There were like a lot of people that came out and responded like saying like, oh, that's not music, blah blah blah, X Y
Yeah.
Z, not real instruments, right? And then I think Skrillex posted something like a letter from that Roosevelt sent. I can't remember. I think it might have been Elvis or something like that. I can't remember the artist, but it was a major artist at the time, and it was talking about how the piano isn't considered a real instrument because it had
Right.
just like been like released. I maybe actually wasn't like Elvis, probably way earlier than that, but it was like a big piano player, and he was just like, yeah, the piano isn't considered real art.
Yeah.
It's like new, it's cheating. That's not fair. So the reason that I immediately kind of like took that random like thought is that I'm wondering in the future when you have this character, this lo-fi character,
Yeah.
the music that they use, do they still use real instruments or is it complete synthetic? Because it's almost ironic.
Yeah,
that,
it's mostly synthetic, right? Like,
yeah.
'cause again, I don't envision them really playing any instruments, and they're like competing against holograms who all their voices are naturally synthesized, right? Like, of course, they probably use a real person's voice, but you edit it like crazy in different software, right? So
Yeah.
you can really make whatever you want, you know? And I'm kind of playing with this idea that like, how far will the entertainment industry go to appeal to these like unrealistic standards, you know? Because I am not a purist myself by any means. Like, I love me some autotune. So I'm not in that camp, but I think it's just not only from a talent perspective, but again, beauty standards. It's from like, how does entertainment even work? Like, will you have hologram concerts in your house? Like, will people even be physically present in concerts anymore, especially after like post-pandemic type of thing? So it's just like more of like a thought exercise for me of like, with this particular work and it being what it is, it's just kind of like, I don't know. And I love that kind of cyberpunky futuristic sci-fi and casually as a viewer anyway, or as a reader. So yeah, this is more of stuff that I like to think about. I don't know.
No, I mean, like I think that's such a fresh look on not just like in the sci-fi genre, but just like music in general. You know, one thing that I always like have like an interest, like when I talk to even romance authors, I always like think like, all right, how do you consider the progression of technology in whatever industry you're interested in?
Yeah.
Right. Like if you're talking about romance, like how would romance look like in 100 years when like,
oh, right. Yeah.
everything's like AI and just like, it's not even a process of like, especially with all the gender fluidity. Imagine that in the future when you don't even know who the real person you're talking to, that you just interact with like an AI by like, via avatar or something like that. So I just think that's such an interesting idea to go off with the whole music and incorporating that with the progression of technology. I mean, oh my God. But without going too much further into that, because that is coming soon.
Yeah, yeah, it will be coming soon. In the books. It's in the books. Yeah.
Watch out for that. Talk to us about Cursed Fate.
Okay. So yeah, let's get back on track. So again, I mentioned this is a project I started when I was 19 years old. It reflects around this main character whose name is Vincent. Again, the only thing I kept from my husband's suggestion was the main character's actual name. So the main character, Vincent, he goes off on his, he graduates, and then he basically comes from this world that's really built for him. Is very privileged, really wealthy, good looking, athletic, doesn't really have any problems to begin with. And then all of a sudden, like, he finds out that the life that he had been completely construed for him because people were keeping secrets about his family behind his back. So this story is about him trying to look for his father. His father has a connection to this otherworldly realm, and he travels back to where his father's family is from, initially Madagascar. And once he's in Madagascar, he traverses into a new realm and interacts with all these beings that are like humanoid, but they're pretty much gods and goddesses in their own way. And he finds out that he belongs to the secret lineage of these super powered people. And they try to help him find his dad, right? That's the whole plot of the book. But the entire time, it's just really, I got really inspired by the like wildlife and the flowers and everything surrounding the island of Madagascar itself. So it felt weird for me to not include it, like, because one of my characters is a giant lemur, and I'm like, okay, obviously this is from Madagascar, so like, yeah, here's where I got inspired by that, right? But it is a place outside of itself. And in the sequel, it's going to be more of like, I don't know if you watched JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, but like the third season, they kind of like do around the world adventure type thing.
Oh, the anime. There's a movie too with with Jeff Goldblum, I think.
Yeah. So they basically just are going to go back and forth because the overall plot is that there's people who are trying to borrow power from this realm and the dark realm, right? What's associated with all the bad stuff. And so they're going to try to stop the humans from trying to mix the realms. Vincent kind of just stumbles into all of this, and then once he realizes, he's like, oh shit, I gotta help out. That's where the second book goes. But the first book's all about him finding out, like, damn, this is my family. Okay, great. And that's how it goes.
Holy.
Yeah.
Now, what are you projecting as far as the series goes? Because obviously there's a book too. So how far do you continue to go with it?
Hopefully, in my head, I can cover the world issue in the second book, right? Because I spent a lot of time building characters in this one, and it's all about like how they interact with each other, what are their relationships like, and setting up expectations, right? Because everybody's expecting Vincent and this other character, Lolina, to just come in and fix everything, right? But they've been gone forever, and it's kind of unrealistic to do that, right? And so your second book's about them trying to figure out like, okay, well shit, how are we going to fix everything? And then I also would really like to include a prequel about like how we got here, because the first book is in my head someplace in the middle, and don't ask me why I decided to start that way. That's just how it ended up happening.
You're an artist, you don't have to explain shit.
Okay. I know, but I again, this is my first time publishing a book ever, so again, things are really new for me, and I really want criticism, feedback, and like everything, like I take that in. But yeah, so I plan on writing the sequel, and then if I feel like there's still content that needs to be explored, I plan on writing a prequel about like, okay, where do these civilizations come from? What happened before Vincent got there? Like, so his the main people he interacts with are Lolina, A.R.T, who's kind of like his mentor throughout this, and these two other princesses who are ruling over their own little islands within this magic realm. And one of them is her natural magic revolves around like cultivation and plants. But they have curses, right? So like a dark edge to their magic. So not only does she cultivate vegetation, but she also cultivates ideas. And so she can like hypnotize people, right? With just speaking to them, or she can influence people that way. Yeah, she is so much fun. I had so much fun writing her because she's your like stereotypical social media guru. Like that's where I got inspiration from, right? Like an Instagram girl, you know what I mean? And then the other princess is kind of like the opposite, right? Where Her Betsoa, she has a set in stone type ability. So she manipulates the earth, rocks, but also she is somebody who can see the future. But the thing is, every time she sees something, it becomes set in stone. Like you can't change it. So she's kind of traumatized and she doesn't want to use her powers as much because she feels like she made this whole catastrophic event happen, right? Because she saw it. She felt like she was personally responsible for this huge traumatic event. And so she doesn't like using that side of her powers anymore. And she doesn't want to use it the same way Ahitra uses hers. And then likewise, they both have like animal companions that kind of take on their faults, right? So when Vetsoa doesn't use her dark magic, it strengthens her lemur companion, which was the character I referenced before. So he becomes very articulate. He can communicate because his magic is strengthened because he comes from her curse, right? He's like a projection of her curse. Likewise with Ahitra, she has like a pet cow. It's like a baby cow because she always uses her curse, right? So this animal creature that's her companion is like has a buff, right? So it's a different relationship. These people got their curses from the bad guy in the book, right? The bad guy went missing, but he's coming back, and all of them are traumatized by him in their own personal lives, right? And then they're realizing, oh shit, we have to stop him before he does this shit to other people, So that's kind of the point. And Lelina is again a princess as well, but she's trapped in between the two realms. And the two girls miss her because they all grew up together. They're immortal, but because she was sacrificed for the bad guy, she's stuck in between worlds. And her power keeps her alive because she is kind of, again, a water elemental, but she also has the power to like death and regeneration. So she can't die. She can survive in the stealth realm because she can manipulate death itself. So her curse is the only thing that's like keeping her alive, which is kind of poetic, I guess. I don't know. And they're trying to find out basically the point. The girls want Lelina back, right? And the next part of the second book where I start off is like Vincent doesn't know that that's what the girls want. He knows that they miss them, right? But Vincent's just trying to find his dad. But there's like secret plots going on underneath because they know that the Dark King is going to sacrifice Vincent in exchange for Lelina's return. So he's pretty much like being a lamb to the slaughterhouse, I guess, but he doesn't know it. So yeah, it's like a lot of conspiracy things. I don't want to give too much away about the plot, and I hope that kind of makes sense with everything going on. I really was thought about, like, when I was writing this, I thought of like, okay, daddy issues, right? Classic daddy issues. We're looking for our father, right? We're trying to be fed in this environment, but at the end of the day, you're just being raised to be sacrificed for these people around you. Oh, and at the end, they rely on your help to fix everything they fucked up. That's kind of like, I think, the overall emotion of it. And it's like frustrating. And like my main character is very sassy. Like he calls people on their bullshit. Like he calls them assholes. But at the same time, he has such a need and a desire to have a family to fit in that he just like goes along with whatever they want. Which is
Are you that type of person?
Maybe.
Not a feeling.
I love my family, but I've had a very complicated relationship with different family members in my life. And I think especially with everything that's gone on in like quarantine and stuff, it brought up some emotions. And I think I unintentionally put a lot of things in there about myself that I didn't intend to. And that's not me saying that like, oh, my family's torturing me. Like, no, not anything like that. But I think that a lot of people can relate to this idea of like, being self-sacrificing for those around you, even though it's doing you harm. I don't know.
No, I completely agree. I mean, like, oh my God.
Yeah.
There's just so much. You know what? There is one thing, and believe me, I will ask a multitude of like directed questions. But you said buff. Do you play MMOs or have you played?
No, but again, husband plays video games. I play RPGs, right? I like RPGs, but I don't do MMOs. No.
I knew it. No, because like I think that type of MMOs and RPGs honestly have like that inherent fantastical element into it. Yeah. So I think like all those things like integrate so well in your story. Like the moment you started talking about all these like different factions and whatnot, I immediately started imagining it almost like it was an MMO or an RPG.
Yeah.
Like, and I think that's a really not only really descriptive way of like storytelling, but I think it's an inherently engaging form of storytelling, because I think we can all understand the blight of having conflicting powers, conflicting countries, going over resources that are limited, or
Yeah.
people that are limited, or XYZ. We live in a world that is quite literally like that. So like,
Right.
you're bringing those elements in while also like, completely them showing a different world, and like building there's like a whole new like aspect around it. So one thing that I really liked about the whole Vincent and Liliana,
Lalina.
Lila,
Yeah.
say it again,
Lalina.
Lilina.
Yes.
So Vincent and Lilina, the thing that I really like about those type of characters is that I've always loved like legendary characters that like the characters that you actually read about have to deal with.
Yeah.
Like often we hear, Harry Potter, perfect example. Harry Potter literally is legend. You're literally, when you read through those 7-8 books, you're reading the legend of Harry Potter, and then within that world, people just refer to Harry Potter. But basically, in your story, Harry Potter already is like gone, and now the characters have to like deal with a world in which a legendary character like that is missing. How did you write that, and how did you get that idea? I think that's we often as writers want to showcase the big gun, but I've always been interested in like, how do characters deal in a world with a person like that?
Right. Again, like, sorry, my voice is like all over the place. Without getting too personal again, I feel like this is getting so personal. I'm the
Writing
eldest.
is pretty personal, honestly.
It is. I'm the eldest sister in my family, and I think a lot of their dynamics, I look towards my own siblings' relationship. I have 2 other siblings, but I'm the only one that left home to go do something. Like, I left Indiana.
I hear you.
And I think I had a lot of repressed guilt over that. And I thought like, oh snap, I'm being selfish. I'm going through and like leaving my family behind when they need me and da 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 da. And it was kind of like me projecting like, okay, what are they doing right now? Like, what are they leaving? And I'm not trying to put myself on God status, because Lord knows that's not the case. But I think that because I know how other people interact when I'm not there, it helped me build those other characters. So my siblings are 2 very different people. One of them is like a goth rocker chick, and she is very like, I'm just rebelling. I'm just doing whatever I want. And I don't care. And it's on my time, which I love her for that. And the other one is very like, when things go south, he turns inward and he just doesn't push back, but he also just isolates himself. And that was inspiration for the 2 of them. So Betsuela literally lives in her own cave. Like, she builds the walls around her, like figured, like literally. And so that's where I got that for her. And then Ahitra is just like, well, if there's nobody else who can fend for me, I'm gonna do it myself, and I don't care who gets hurt in the way, And I think responding to like trauma responses and things like that is what really interests me. When the legend's gone, I feel like people just turn selfish, not selfish, but they're like self-protective, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So the characters right now without her are very much like, well, I'm just taking care of me, and I'm taking care of my area, and if the world goes to shit, the world goes to shit, right? But ultimately that's not sustainable, right? And they found that out now, that they know like, oh, if Vincent's here, that means that he's back. The Dark King is back, and I have to protect myself. Yeah, but I also realize like, oh shit, everything's going to go to shit if he comes back. So I have to do what I have to do to make sure that's not the case. And like, I studied IR in school, like international relations, and I feel like that's kind of like how a lot of people view politics in general as like, what can I get for myself, even though I disagree with that. But that's kind of like where my brain goes to when I think about power vacuums. It's more of like, okay, let me protect my resources and keep things close to heart. But is that the right thing to do? Like, that's the question. And I think that's the question in the book as well.
God, and that's like a really philosophical question. Because like, logically, how can I give you half a cookie if I have no cookies?
Right.
But man, that is, I mean, again, beautiful concept, beautiful writing. How do you think that current world events, and not just our current world events, but history in general.
Mhm.
How do you think that plays inspiration wise into your writing? Like,
Oh yeah.
are there any? I mean, like you just said that your characters are represented through your family and things that you've gone through, which again, beautiful. But as far as the events go, do you kind of tailor make it or just draw inspiration from real world events that have happened?
Oh yeah, definitely. Again, like because again, I got a lot of inspiration from Madagascar itself. So I'm very
Like the
interested.
movie?
Oh no, like the country.
I like to move it.
Yeah, yeah. King Julian though, yes. Um, I think I'm always interested in the way, like the whole idea of the the West versus like the global South, right? I'm interested in like the colonizer relationship, but post colonialism and how do we rebuild, you know? And
Oh shit.
yeah, so
South
again,
Africa, things like that. Australia, a pretty good one.
yeah, perfect. And like I studied a lot of Latin America. Like my husband's from Brazil, and I've been back and forth in Brazil a lot. And like I'm no expert, but you just look at like again my politics, what the U.S. has done in terms of Latin American politics, and it's just absolutely horrendous.
Yeah.
And no matter how hard some of these people try to rebuild on their own terms, they can't get that way because of outside influences. And I think that that is a big key with these books because again, in the second book, the bad guy is going to be working with the powers that be in our actual world to try to give them the magic power they need. And I think a lot more political undertones will come into play, especially seeing you're going to see these former colonizers trying to get power again through these dark means. The same way they've been doing, I guess. I don't know, but
No,
yeah,
take pride
I
in that. Yeah, 100%.
know.
I agree. 1000%. I mean, God, we can take a whole other tangent about just that. But
Yeah.
in relation to your book, what do you feel that you write it skewered in a certain way, or do you think that you really try to be honest to both sides?
I don't know. Speaking honestly, like I think I'm always somebody who has very strong opinions. Of course, I listen to everybody and everything, but um, I definitely have my political affiliations are tied to my morality in a way. And I know that shines through with the book. This isn't meant to be like a Republican versus Democrat type of thing because politics goes way beyond that. It's more of like how people should be interacting with each other and how we should treat each other as people. Um,
Hmm.
and so
Wow.
it's more of just people trying to reclaim their power, I think. And I think that's the politics of my book, at least. Like, I don't want to get into anything that's like too like I don't know, like mainstream US politics. That's not the case. But I'm really interested in the fact that like you have these places that had such well-developed, rich cultures originally, and then they came in and they suffered so much tragedy and all that was lost. And it's like, how do you rebuild? And if these places were to rebuild, would they rival that of the powers that we have now? And if that's the case, then that's why the powers that we have now are trying to suppress these people and their voices. That's just kind of like where I'm at in that realm. Um, and yeah, it's like developmental economics mixed with my personal feelings that we should just be nice to each other and treat each other well, and we shouldn't have these like power grabs at everything because at the end of the day, greed is the root of all evil, in my opinion. But yeah.
Honest, my God, I mean, phenomenal answer. But the only reason I ask is because I think when you grow older, you start realizing there is no such thing as black and white. Everything truly
Right.
is like gray. Like
Yeah.
it's gray areas everywhere. I remember the first time I really felt that in like an IR type of sense was like the whole Syrian refugee thing because you really understood both sides. It's like
Right.
a country that's already at capacity. How can you accept more? But at
Yeah.
the same time, it's like how can you not help your fellow human out? Like you got to let them in. They're just looking for
Mhm.
a better life.
Yeah.
Uh, and that's a tough situation. How do you write that on a personal level? Because that's the cool thing about writers. It's not
Right.
just thinking about it on like over a cocktail at a bar talking about this. Like you actually get to write about it at a personal level. So how
Right.
did you take it to that extreme, to that level?
Right. And I think it's hard for me because, I'm a white woman who grew up in the US. I've never had to endure anything like that, period. And if I were to try to write that genuine experience, I would be doing a disservice to my readers, point blank, period. But I do know how to convey emotion through my own personal loss, right? And I know what it's like to try to constantly have to prove yourself in certain spaces, or to have to demand basic respect. And I think that as long as I can incorporate those sorts of emotions in the work, it will still be genuine and authentic. Granted, there are cases too where I can just, again, the sequel isn't fully formed quite yet. But again, I think everybody in their heart has had that feeling where there's been some sort of prejudice against them. And I think that's a human experience, unfortunately. And I think writing that in would only make it more powerful. But again, I don't want that to be the sole purpose of the book, because the point of the book is to entertain. And it's to give these characters their own life and not just a social critique of our world, right? And I think at the end of the day, I want people to be able to connect with my characters and have this form of escapism without having their own plights thrown at their faces. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like making it relatable enough where you can really connect and understand that, like, oh shit, my experiences are valid, but also like I'm not gonna like romanticize your trauma, because
Yeah.
that's not my place to do that. Like it's not, right? I can't tell somebody else how to feel about their trauma in a specific instance, like refugees. I have no experience with that whatsoever. But I think like one of the things I like to explore too, like just going back onto the politics of it, is like environmental refugees, like with all the weather catastrophes that are going on and all these islands being flooded. That is a real issue. Like people are going to have to move inland to places where we won't have the land space for them, but at the end of the day, what do you do? And I feel like that's a theme that could be very well explored in any sort of sci-fi. I mean, I know you have like, what was it, Westworld, is that what it's called?
Yeah,
With like
100%.
yeah, like they have that.
Great
But
show.
from a different perspective, I think that can be included. And since a lot of my second book is going to be on the water, that might be a theme we can incorporate in that way. But like I said, I can't be anybody's spokesperson because I'm just a girl from Indiana, so that's not my truth. But yeah.
Well, I guess that's the whole thing of sci-fi. I mean, even my book, I mean, I even use like the whole overpopulation trope.
Yeah.
I think it's one of those things that like we inherently just write about the events of the world as we see them.
Right.
Like Frankenstein happened after like the Black Plague thing and just like experiencing that. And like, Edgar Allan Poe was during tuberculosis when people would just like cough on a napkin and be like, oh shit, I guess I'm dying in 2 weeks. And, shit was like real. And like what we're experiencing now is we're headed, if you look at things like that's kind of like where we're headed. So you just immediately kind of like think it's like, all right, imagine the situation extrapolated.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think certain things that we all share, like even this past year with like the global pandemic, that's just a marker in our experience, right? Like nobody's able to go. I was literally quarantined in a studio apartment for a year and a half, and I didn't like leave the house, period. And that had such an impact on my physical and mental health. And people have had it a lot worse than me. People have had it a lot better than me. But no matter what, it has affected every single person in some way. And I would not be surprised to see more books coming out about like the Paris, like being locked in theme. I think like the psychological torture that comes in with claustrophobia and things like that. I would not be surprised if that's a genre that takes off within the next 5 years either.
And you know what? And to kind of go off of that too, I think that's why romance is like booming, because like everyone's like inside, and it's just like intimacy is just like but my God, the whole thing with Cursed Fate, and specifically that water theme, was something that really interested me. Can you elaborate on that a little bit for the second book?
Oh yeah, no, definitely. So again, things I'm interested in is just kind of like the idea of just sailing around the world. I feel like that's an old archetype that's been around forever, but I feel like people haven't touched. Yeah, exactly. Like people haven't touched it in a while. And so the sequel book, I literally just wrote like 3 chapters, and I've left it alone because I've done a lot of marketing stuff lately.
I hear you.
Yeah, it's a struggle to balance that. But basically where they're at right now is that they're sailing on the back of a giant fish, and they are trying to figure out, okay, what's the next steps, right? And I think even in like, we brought up Avatar franchise, something about just traveling with a core friend group like that is just, I don't know, nostalgic and homey to me. And after the book, like if you read my book, there's a lot of like questionable moments where you're like, damn, that took a dark turn. I wanted to have this kind of like nostalgic bonding moment for at least this group core of 4 people, where they can just breathe and be like friends again, like on a car ride, like a road trip, right? And then after the fact, who knows? But I want them to have those in between bonding moments, especially since they're like these powerful people and they're really scary and intimidating. Like even just the way I described them, they're pretty frightening. But at the end of the day, I want them to be young adults, right? And young adults make mistakes, a lot of mistakes. I made a lot of mistakes. And I want that spirit to carry through. So that's kind of where I'm at right now with this water theme. And the idea is that they have to go in between the 2 realms, right? Between their archipelago realm where they're at right now and Earth. And there'll be different vantage points where they can cross. I'm not sure how they're going to do that yet. Very much still a work in progress. But I thought just the ocean would be a perfect vehicle for that because water, transformative, metaphorically, it's kind of just like you go with the flow and see where life takes you. And I think that's kind of like my mental attitude right now. And so that's where I'm going with it. That might change in 2 months. We'll see.
That's the final famous final words right there. And we're gonna check back in like a couple months. It's like, oh no, yeah, it's completely out of there. They teleport by just like, like Goku. They just put their finger on their forehead and that's it. But there's something that you touched on that I really liked a lot. I think it's something that should be highlighted. It's like the inclusion of horror. I think horror, like comedy and romance, is something that can be injected in absolutely every single genre and should be. Because again, it's inherent human emotion. I mean, to write any story and leave out like at least some type of love interest is like a disservice as a writer. Because we were talking about human experiences, like how love is one of them, and so is fear. That's the thing.
Right.
So how do you incorporate those type of elements into your writing?
Oh boy.
Without oversaturating it, because then you don't want people to be like, oh, this is a horror book. You want it just to be like, little elements of it.
Right. And it's hard because I feel like with mine, it can tend to get that way. And I think that is just a reflection of, I don't know, it literally just popped out. Like, I don't mean to sound basic. And
how's that basic?
I don't know. It's funny because I gave people in my life like the test things. I'm like, hey, I literally just wrote this. Can you read it? And at certain parts, they'd look back and do a double take, and they're like, Cass, this isn't anything like you. Like, what is this? This is so terrifying. Because with like the one scene that I think the first real scary scene is when Vincent's mother dies in front of him. And it's not like, oh, I'm dying. It's she gets torn apart. It's kind of, it's scary and graphic, and he's the one that has to basically pull the plug on her. Which again, for me, it's like shock value, okay, but it's also just to show how much of an emotional toll this is, and like how it really desensitizes the character. And maybe that's why he's also more lenient to take this sorts of, to go along with whatever these magical people are saying, because how can he turn back from that? Like there's so much instability. And I don't know where that came about. I don't know how to explain it, but there's other parts too. Like I have some scary vampire creatures that are scary because, hello, they're going to hunt you. They're chasing the main character. This is an adventure story. So like, yeah, they're going to be terrifying because he thinks they're terrifying. He's like fearing for his life right now. But I always make sure that the main character himself, no matter what he goes through, is making jokes about it to kind of balance it out. Like, and again, that's a defense mechanism for a lot of people, but he always ends up making a joke about like what he went through. And again, he's like a 19-year-old boy, and I feel like guys kind of do that. I mean, I don't know. I'm writing as a boy. I'm not a boy. I don't know. But
yeah, but you're a female that have talked to 19-year-old boys.
Huh?
Yeah, but you're a female that have talked to 19-year-old boys. You know.
Yeah, I have. Yeah, yeah. So I try to do that because I don't want a broken person to just be broken, because most of the times people aren't. People are more resilient than we give them credit for, and people go through so much stuff. The average person really does, but I feel like it's the people who go through a lot who tend to have this like sense of humor about it, because that's what keeps them going. And again, I don't want it to be oversaturated with horror, but I think that fleshes out my character a little bit more because he's just so resilient because of it. his humor is really what keeps him going. And yeah, I don't know if that really answers your question. I don't know where that horror came from. I've always had an interest in horror movies and scary things, and so that's what I like. But again, I don't want it to be like an edgelord type of story, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I like that too, because again, like I think the best genres incorporate a whole bunch of different genres. Well, best books incorporate a whole bunch of different genres. And I think, tell me about the comedy.
Oh, okay. Yeah, he's kind of he's sassy. He's like sarcastic. He knows he's cute. And okay, so there's one scene where he meets a teacher, right? And he's supposed to go in and basically win her favor because they're trying to get information from her. And everyone knows that, again, if she's someone who can like hypnotize you, you're not gonna get shit from her. So you really have to work, right? In the very beginning, she like he's like trying to be all like noble and princely and be like, oh, hello, Princess Ahitra, like thank you for welcoming us to your palace. And she like takes a picture of him and she puts it on her story and like does like a swipe left emoji, just kind of making fun of him for being corny and shit. And so instead of just being floored by this, he's like, oh, well, if you want to take a picture of me for your stories, all you had to do was ask. Like, you know, like he's like not a playboy necessarily, but he you can't catch him slipping. You know what I mean?
100%.
Yeah. So he's just kind of like this dude. He's just kind of funny. He's like cheers people up. But at the end of the day, like he's called the two of them assholes at the very end. He's like, I don't know why I would listen to you guys. You're just a bunch of assholes. You know, I'm just gonna do my thing. Yeah, I that's just who he is. He's a sassy, good-looking young man, and I feel like that's a trope too, to make your main characters like pretty, but he's not really pretty. Like
he's confident.
Yeah, that's it. You know what? He's got that swagger about him. You know, like
Yeah.
he's just kind of like, things are going to shit, but you know what? I'm here. I'm doing me. The same kind of like, I think the same energy that the other characters have, but he's just more vocal about it, and he's more willing to try to like relieve the tension with a joke. He calls the lemur Donkey Kong at one point in time. So, yeah, that's just him.
Now, where did you draw inspiration for that character?
Oh my god. Okay, so a lot of different people actually. I tried looking at my brother and myself when we were 19, because I feel like all 19-year-olds just have that like condescending kind of like confidence that you will never get in your life ever again, which is beautiful and I love it. But I also looked at different like anime characters. I looked at like I got a lot of inspiration from, again, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure with Jotaro, and different characters in there. I kind of looked more of like the playful asshole, if that makes sense. I don't know.
Yep.
Yeah, when I first read it, I've had some people say like, oh, he reminds me of Draco Malfoy, but I was like, ew, where? Just because he's like snobby. Not really. He's not really snobby because he's like always willing to help people out, and Draco's just kind of like a racist wizard, kind of, or like he comes from a racist wizard family. I don't know. He's just lovable asshole. I don't know.
Oh yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. It reminds me of people I know.
Okay.
No, I'll be in the best way possible.
Yeah.
What about your side characters? What about your side characters? And as well, what about like the whole do you play around with any romances within your work?
Yes, I do. Okay, so again, it's mostly Vincent, a bunch of women, an old man, and some animals, right? So there's not a lot of opportunity for romance, but there's kind of like flirtation all the time. Vincent's a flirt. He flirts with everybody. But at the end of the day, he has a physical attraction to Hitra because, again, she's like the Instagram baddie. She's beautiful. Whereas another time, he's like a more of an emotional support for Princess Vatasoa, and she really likes him because she's shy and she's like attached to him. But it's very clear that he doesn't really feel the same way about her. He's more of like a supportive friend. And then his relationship with Lelina, he's just mystified by her. It's not necessarily like romantic, but more in awe, and it's the same sort of awe that the other two girls feel for her too. So I've always tried to go back and forth on how I'm going to play this romance out, but right now he's really crushing on Ahitra, and we'll see if that continues into the second book.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Now, what about the technical aspects of the book? How was it actually writing it, getting it edited, getting the cover done? Talk to me about that whole process.
Right. So I think, so like I said, I started this when I was 19, dropped off, and then I spent about a year and a half picking up and finishing it. I tried, the writing's hard. Sometimes you have routines, sometimes you don't. But when I was really trying to push myself to get stuff done, I wrote about 1,000 words a day. And that really got me to where I was. In terms of editing, I mean, I went through numerous times, but of course there's stuff that you miss as the author. It's incredibly biased. Like if you are an author, I really recommend you getting other people in your life to read it, but then actually getting somebody who is an editor to actually read it. I'm very fortunate because I got traditionally published by a very small publisher called Ukiyoto Publishing, and they handled a lot of that for me. They also did rounds of editing, and at the very end I read through everything to sign off on like yes or no, is everything's good. In terms of cover design, again, I'm not an artist, and they hired an artist to do the cover work, and I was very pleased with it. So that's why the cover looks the way it does. It's very nice. And yeah, and I was surprised with how quick they were as a publishing house, because after going back and forth, it took about 2 months to get things rolled out, which is very fast compared to other places. Yeah, but I've had a pleasant experience with that. So on the technical end, I can't really speak to too much outside of writing itself, because a lot of that I had help with.
Well, that's awesome. You're actually the fourth author from that publishing house to be interviewed here. I think.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Julia, Lori
Okay.
Okanowski,
Yeah.
Alexandra Robinson. I don't know if you're familiar with them on Instagram. Yeah, they're all with that publishing house, Ukiyoto, right?
Yes.
I always get that mixed up, but I said it right for the first time. Progress.
Yes.
So, now, so to wrap it up, what is the elevator pitch for your book? If you were in an elevator with a Netflix executive and you were like, hey, by the way, what would be your pitch?
Oh geez, I think we can tell by the beginning of this interview that I'm not very good at like condensing anything. But that's a good question. I'm so bad at editing, which is why I hired somebody else to do it. I don't know. I think my elevator pitch would be like, hey, this story is about a young man searching to find his father. Cliche, but in order to do so, he's got to cross realms and basically solve an apocalypse in order to just meet his dad. So there you go.
Yeah, that's not bad.
Yeah, I guess so. I don't know. I feel bad because it's very much a very basic storyline. Boy tries to find dad, which is basically like Hercules. It's every freaking movie you've ever had in your life. But, I think it's the stuff that's going on the way that makes it more special than the actual plot line itself,
No, I agree 100%. I mean, if you boil down any story, I mean, have you watched Breaking Bad?
No, but it's my sister's favorite show.
Well, it's my favorite show.
Yeah.
So if you ask like the creator of Breaking Bad, he's gonna tell you that it's about like character development and progression and all this bullshit. If you ask any fan, it's gonna be like, oh, it's about meth and killing and all this crazy shit. So like there is a huge dichotomy between what the author writes and like what they feel passionate about, because like when we speak about it, we're talking about our passions.
Of course.
Whereas as a reader breaking it down, it's like, oh no, there was the scene that they were on a big turtle, like they were in fucking Avatar. It was fucking crazy. It was crazy. Yeah. It was the best book I ever read in my life. So it's those type of things. And like even I myself, I just recently, when I went through immigration, they asked me what I did as occupation. I said author, and they were like, oh, ask me about the book, like grilling me and whatnot. And I literally was just like, I have no answer for you, buddy.
Oh, that's so
you might have to take me in jail right now.
Oh my God. Well, I can only imagine, like, we went through immigration for our K-1 visa, and we're doing it, refiling again after our marriage. And I can only imagine trying to defend your art on top of defending yourself to the government,
Yeah. I mean, and I don't like talking to the police in general. So I'm just there like, I mean, I'm an author. Well, like, what else do I got to tell you?
Right.
But I'm truly just like in love with this series. Cursed Fate, is it gonna be the like is that the name of book one, or is that gonna be the saga? Is it gonna be Cursed Fate 1, 2, 3? Is it gonna be
Okay.
Cursed Fate, Cursed Fates, 3 Fates, 2 Cursed? I don't know. How do you
Again, playing around with that. Right now it looks like it's going to be like curse something, curse something, curse something.
Oh, cool.
Ask me again in a couple months and we'll see.
No, but that's like a really cool. I mean, I love this idea. I really do.
Thank you.
Now, so as far as where people can find you, because the book is available right now, Kindle Unlimited and paperback. It is free, literally. If you have Kindle Unlimited, it's free to read. Go ahead and give it a read, give it a review. Are you also up on Goodreads? Can people find you there?
Not yet. That's in the works.
Again, no, okay.
Very new to this.
Me too.
If people want to stay updated, it's probably best to follow my Instagram account at Writing with Cass. And that way, whenever I get everything more professionally formalized, you will know.
And while we're on the subject, do you have anything else? I mean, I believe you have a link tree, so if you want to drop that. And do you have a website, like anything else where people can find you and connect?
Yeah, of course. Thank you for asking that. So I have my new website up. I literally just finished it this week. Yeah, which is basically just my name, www.KassidyVanGundy.com. It's cute. It's like neon pink and black, and it'll have Cursed Fate stuff on there, but it'll also have like different, like what I'm doing in terms of book signing events and things like that. I also have a YouTube channel if people are interested in me as a person, in addition to writing. It's called Cutify with a K, Kutie FLY. Oh Jesus, I forgot how to spell for a second. And yeah, that's basically it. I'm working on consolidating everything into one single source. Again, this has been a very grassroots formation of my career so far, and I apologize for that inconvenience, but it will be up soon.
That is not an inconvenience. It is what is it? It's not a bug, it's a feature.
Yeah.
It's part of the process. It's a cool thing about actually being able to connect with the authors. There was at no point in time that you could really connect to Stephen King. You can send him a letter, but he's not gonna write back.
Exactly.
And again, just beautiful and phenomenal. And is there anything else? What are your final thoughts? What is the last thing that you want to say to the people before we cut off?
I just want to say thank you for having me. First and foremost, this is great. This is my first podcast interview at all about the book. So thank you for being patient with me. And I just want to let anybody know, if you have any inkling to write, period, just do it. I know it's a really scary process to put yourself out there. And it's very scary to have people read and have their opinions about what you do. But you'll kick yourself in the butt if you don't do it. So do your best. Try hard and reach out to the community for advice, because my 200 followers on my little Instagram account and everybody I talk to has been absolutely amazing. So, there's support. If you just got to find it. You just got to ask,
Very well said. Believe in yourself.
Yes.
Got to believe in yourself. And with that, phenomenal episode. Thank you so much, Kassidy. This has just been a pleasure. Make sure to pick up Cursed Fate, Kindle Unlimited, and Amazon. KassidyVanDyke.com, Instagram. Just Google her name. You will find that everything will pop up. Make sure to follow her on the Amazon page. Do what you got to do. Leave a review. This is the end of the podcast, A.R.'s Tales, aka the A.R.T podcast. I've been A.R. This has been Kassidy. Thank you for rocking with us, and check back on with us on Friday when we have our new episode. Thank you and peace out.